Welcome to Season 3 of the Amani Experience podcast. In this podcast, you will experience wisdom, advice, and stories from creatives all over the world. Your host is the award-winning Amani Roberts, who is a DJ, music producer, professor, author, and undercover gamer. On the show, we love to share the stories of creative professionals, especially people who have gone from the corporate life to the creative life. Once again, welcome to the Amani Experience podcast.
I would like to welcome Megan Sanchez to the Amani Experience podcast.
Hi, Amani. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. We're excited to chat with you. We do a geographical check-in, so tell everyone where you are right now.
I am in Washington, D.C., the northeast corner of Washington, D.C.
Northeast. I grew up in Silver Spring, Maryland, went to Howard University in Northwest, so I'm very familiar with that area.
Nice. Awesome.
All right, so we're going to chat with you, get to know you a little bit better. I'm really curious to figure out, first of all, did you grow up in D.C.?
I did not. I was born outside Chicago. Actually, I was born near Naperville, Winfield, Illinois. And I was little when we moved from there, but mostly grew up in Maryland, Pennsylvania. I went to school in New York and then ended up back down in DC. Yeah.
Nice. I used to live in Glendale Heights and work near Schaumburg, so I know Chicago pretty well. One of my favorite places to live.
Yeah, Chicago's a great city.
Agreed. Now, if you look, Megan, at where you are right now in today's kind of space, how would you summarize yourself in 30 seconds or less?
Oof. Yeah, so it's a tough one. So I'm doing a lot of work now in the health and wellness field. So I have a business called Upswing Health Coaching, where I work with a lot of people in the area and virtually a lot of people who are combating burnout and building healthy lifestyles. So before I was there, I was a designer for about, close to 12 years in architecture and design. I did what was called environmental graphic design. So, right now, though, I'm just a very curious person, a very active person. I'm at home right now a lot.
Yes, we are.
But, normally I'm I'm one of those people who likes to be out and about, experiencing new things all the time.
I've read in the past where you said that passion picked you. So I'm curious to know what passion picked you.
Yeah. So I think a lot about, in my lifestyle, moving around, like I said, and being active and kind of being healthy has kind of been something that's always been like kind of built into my DNA. Just that idea of like kind of honoring my body, paying attention to my thoughts. But I think also being a creative was something that chose me, and I kind of chose that path in the beginning. But I've kind of teetered around and balancing both and like understanding how people think and how I think. And that's kind of been my journey the whole time. When I was doing design, it was all about experience and connecting people into environments. And now I'm back in a space where I'm talking about lifestyle and making sure people are living the way they want to.
Definitely. You mentioned burnout before. What is your definition of burnout?
Oh, man. There's like the technical definition, right? I think it comes with a lot of things. I think we'll notice things in our physicality, a lot of fatigue, a lot of exhaustion. I think with burnout, also something that comes with a lot of resentment, right? Like not being attached to the things that you're engaged in and then struggling with the constant ask for more, and I think there's a lack of clarity mostly of who you are and kind of in what direction you're headed and what you want.
Great definition. What inspired you to leave your graphic design space that you spent over 10 years in to kind of pursue your current profession and vocation?
Yeah. So I think, again, excellent question. And it probably was my own experience of hustle in a non-healthy way in the corporate world. And I think it goes without saying that, like, I've worked in some really awesome firms. Ended up working in 3 design firms over the course of the years with super talented, creative people. But I think it was more the mechanisms of how I was doing it that kind of drove me to leave and kind of, make me feel like I was at the bottom of my well of creativity and I didn't have anything more to give, and so I found myself in a space where I kind of took a look around and I wasn't attached to what I was doing anymore. And just kind of noticed that a lot of people around me were in the same kind of blind hustle right? In that corporate culture of just kind of looking good on paper and, building a career of maybe what I thought I should be doing. But then getting really curious about why we have these beliefs that, we have to struggle for success and why we have to throw our health to the wayside to get there. So my own personal experience, and then just like a need to really, I think, make impact and touch other lives pushed me to make a change.
Interesting. What do you feel is important for creative professionals such as myself, to succeed in today's business environment?
I think it's to remember your value. I know that in instances I've been in, and with a lot of the people I work with, creatives, we kind of, a lot of times sometimes it comes naturally. Sometimes we build it and we work on it like a muscle. But I think we're kind of quick to dismiss, our way of thinking that's so unique and special. And so we'll often say, oh, but anybody can think this way, or anybody could do this certain thing. And I think when you go into the corporate world and you start to get into that grind of like contracts and budgets and staying in, a specific like lane, it's important to remember how much you're bringing to the table, and the idea of creative problem solving and like that design thinking kind of mentality. I think it can do so much good in the world. And so, hanging on to that value as you grow and build whatever you're trying to achieve is super important.
Why do you feel that it's so hard for many people to kind of hold on to that value and kind of forget it along the way?
Yeah, I think it's easy to get distracted by what I would call like our shoulds, like things we should be doing. And whether it's so different for everyone, right? Like whether it's like, get the house, get the car, get married, have a family, like all these kind of constructs that, I can think as we set out to achieve, and some of them are great, right? Like, and those are things we want. I think it's easy to lose sight maybe of who we are really internally, and kind of how those things shift and how we honor them. So, kind of dismissing that value to keep climbing the ladder and keep pushing forward to that like maybe false definition of success. I mean, I think I did that for a while. I think a lot of people do.
Right. Definitely. Yeah. I've also read where in the past you said that focus on the good rather than preventing the bad. Yeah. Why do you feel that's important?
Yeah, because I think it helps us direct our energy. And when we can see the positive things that came out of a situation, I think we're more likely to, whether it be to try again or to pivot and keep going. I think that one thing I see is that we're kind of in that like hard, like work hard, push hard, fast society. And sometimes we're not always like hitting a mark that we once envisioned. And so, a lot of times things take consistency and take time. And so if you can focus on actually celebrating the things that you're accomplishing and where you came from, you're likely to try again. And that's where the good stuff comes from.
Agreed. What was the turning point of your career? Like, when do you feel, you were all in, you recognize this is what you're supposed to do? When was the turning point?
I don't know. That's a tough one. I think, and I think that this is a tough one is because I feel like a lot of times entrepreneurs and people who make big shifts think that there's going to be like what I call like this unicorn moment of like, I don't know, you land something massive and you think it is like the big shift, right? And you're like, I've made it, or things seem to be changing. And for me, I just felt like it's like tiny thing after tiny thing that's added up. But I would say, when I left the corporate environment, when I wasn't designing and I was starting to coach, and this was in the very beginning, I probably just had a couple paying clients under my belt. And I remember the first couple experiences where I was starting to get really positive feedback of text messages, emails from clients of, I'm thinking in a different way. This is changing my life. Or like a client who then stayed with me for like longer than a year. And I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, this impact and this connection, this is like totally where it's at. And I would think, I think coming out of design and totally switching sectors, there was like total like imposter syndrome, like just emanating everywhere. And when you have those first couple of moments where you think like, I can make a difference here, that would be a turning point. That's pretty powerful stuff. Yeah,
definitely. You mentioned imposter syndrome. How'd you get through and work your way through that? Because that can be tough at times.
Yeah. I think what the best part about it is the awareness that it happens for everybody.
Mm.
And that we're not meant to stay. I think that, like we said, we're curious beings on purpose, and we're not meant to stay in one place. Like, we're meant to explore a lot of different things and dabble and try. And I think that's actually the bravery of it all, right? If you sit still and you say, stay safe, what are you going to miss? And so, I don't even know if I've ever gotten over it, right? Every time I try something new, I just think to myself, well, this is where I want my growth to be. And there's like a lot of magic in a beginner's mindset, and I'm going to go from there.
Many people, especially kind of the old school way of thinking, feel that you're really only supposed to do one thing, stick to your one lane, and not really kind of go outside of it. What's your perspective on that? I have my own feeling. I disagree. But what's your perspective on that? And how do you think that we can kind of move forward with maybe an alternate way of thinking?
Yeah. Again, I'm with you. I disagree. And I think sometimes it changes. It's generational. We're all like learning different things about how society operates and what we can contribute. But for me, what I noticed, particularly switching from design into coaching, is that I actually feel more creative now than I ever have. And I can attribute a lot of that to the things I learned as a designer, and again, that way of thinking. But it's not like I don't see these things as like separate entities. Like, so much of what I've learned in the past, I bring into my new career, and vice versa with wherever I go in the future. It's like, I kind of just think of all of this stuff as like these kind of like generalist skills, like the skills of being really aware and listening to people, and taking different perspectives. I mean, those ideals they help you everywhere, right? And
They do.
so, yeah, I think as you kind of shift your thinking, you realize good things can happen no matter what field you're in.
Yeah, I agree as well. One of my favorite people, one of my favorite podcasts, one of my virtual mentors is like a designer. Have you heard of Debbie Millman with Design Matters?
No, I haven't.
I'll share you some information. She's amazing,
Yeah.
and so I love what she does. And she's a designer, and she's branched out and done tons of things. So, yeah, I'm a
Mm.
fan.
Yeah.
Why do you love what you do?
I love what I do now because of the variety. I think when I started to getting into coaching, I felt one of the things I was curious about and I really wanted to learn about was this idea of just celebrating individuality and what like everybody's own definition of like health and wellness was, right? Like, not prescribing to like a diet mentality or this worked for one person or this worked for the other person, but really like getting to know yourself and how you can make habits and healthy living feel really like easy, right? Because they're all about you. Um, so I love that every time I'm working with a group of people or with an individual, that it's like a total level playing field, right? It's like what worked for one person will not work for another, and there's just so much to learn and explore, and it keeps it so exciting, right? And so you're working with someone to build. You're really helping them build what they love, their life, and that feels different every single time.
On the flip side, what is something that scares you?
Oh, it scares me. Huh. I think when I think about what scares me, I think it's a big general thing. It's probably a big life thing. And maybe I'm just on this track of thought now because of the time period we're in. But I always feel scared when I feel like I'm alone, right? Like when I don't feel like I have um, or, I usually have the resources and support, but I'm putting that pressure on myself to feel like I have to figure it out all alone. And so I think my biggest fear would be not to be able to have like those support, those systems of family, friends, entrepreneurs, colleagues, people who kind of like bring that light in and kind of let you know that there's a lot of ways to do things and there's a lot of ways to look at things, and that you're not alone. You've got a big team behind you.
Now, loneliness is a growing epidemic. What tips and tactics do you have that you share with people to help them get through loneliness and work your way through it? Because especially nowadays, and even after we get through this, loneliness will continue to be an issue. What are kind of some ways we can work our way through that?
Yeah. And I think, of course, it will be kind of that turning inward and understanding what you're comfortable with, and taking the tiniest steps forward from there. So I think it's important to understand why you feel lonely, right? Is it that you have a certain like disposition or personality that lends yourself to being there? Is it because you kind of have some internal inner critic that makes you believe that perhaps others wouldn't want to interact with you, right? Like, so it's kind of the question of like, why do you feel lonely, and maybe where's that story coming from? But I think now more than ever, it's just finding what level of connectivity feels good for you. So for some people that's texting, for some people that's doing things like this and being like the total extrovert and making it happen. But I think loneliness, like you can be an extrovert and you still experience it, right? You can be lonely. You can be lonely in a crowd. So I think it's more kind of like understanding that inner dialogue and not pushing it away, but just kind of like inviting it in and understanding what you want to learn from it.
Yeah, you can be lonely in a crowd. That is the truth.
Yeah.
Now, the industry you're in, kind of the health coach industry is very crowded. How do you rise above all the noise and distinguish yourself from the competition?
I think this was one of the first things I learned as a coach is that, right, there's so many of us in every field. There's so many of everything that you do. And I think in the beginning, I totally would just sit there and think of like, wow, do I have the right programs? Am I in the right niche? Am I doing this? Am I doing that right? And it was probably someone who said to me, maybe even a mentor or a coach who said, well, the people that you're meant to work with are going to work with you because of you, right? Like it's, they're going to be attracted to your personality and the way that you can engage and kind of like build that rapport and have that connection. So at the end of the day, and I feel like this is kind of the lamest, boringest advice that everyone gives all the time. It's like, but you've got to be you. You've got to be you, because otherwise you're going to start attracting the people that like you're probably actually not supposed to be working with.
Right.
And I think I've learned that too.
Definitely have to be you for sure.
Yeah.
How has a failure or apparent failure set you up for success? Do you have a favorite failure of yours?
Oh, I think being an entrepreneur is kind of it's just all about the failures. And again, yeah, I don't think it's the one that stands out. I can think of a couple of things right in the beginning of coaching that really stood out for me and helped me to move forward. But I also try and keep in mind that like you've got to go through the no's. Like you've got to go through the no's to get to the yeses. But I remember when this was a couple of years ago when I was still designing full time and just dabbling in coaching. And I started to do get in the community, the wellness community, and do like talks and lunch and learns. And I did a circuit with a bunch of co-working places here in DC. And I was kind of giving a talk that they wanted around a topic. And man, I went to a bunch of these co-working spaces, and some of them, it was like me and one other person. And there sometimes it was like two people. Sometimes it was a group and not really. And I was like hustling around doing all this work for free. And I would walk in these rooms and no one would be there. And I remember thinking to myself then that was like, I don't know, just kind of that idea of like, this was going to be a constant day-to-day thing of learning and not seeing that as a failure, but seeing it as, like you said earlier, focusing on the good. Here I am practicing just engaging with one person or doing my talk to a small crowd. And that was a hustle. I remember that a lot. And I remember it was so early that I felt like all the time thinking like, I'm not cut out for this. But God, in between then and now, so many things, and you just keep going.
What did you do to not let the no's you consistently were receiving stop you and just kind of force you to go back into design full time? Oh,
yeah. I think that the important thing about a no is kind of understanding why. What's always been helpful for me is to kind of go back and reflect and assess, or even ask where you get your no from, like why, or would you mind sharing with me what was your reasoning or something like that. As far as going back into design, I feel like even when it just kind of like exposed an old habit or a pattern for me if I were to return to something because I failed. And then I had this feeling that I would find myself again in 6 months wanting to step out and try something new. And I think the fear of going back into something that felt like not a great fit at the time became greater than the fear of getting the more no's, is the only way I can describe it.
Yes, that's an excellent description. I can understand and relate 100%. Definitely. Yeah. As you continue to grow and you get more acclaim, you do acquire more critics, or haters, as we call them. How do you handle the critics?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I think what's interesting about, especially in my field, is that a lot of times it's coming, and I try to remember this. There's always that moment where you kind of like want to throw a pillow against the wall or whatever. But I think I try to remember a lot that criticism is often coming from someone's own internal, like, I don't want to say shortcoming, but their own experience, right? Or something that they're noticing about themselves that they don't like, that you're challenging.
Mhm.
And so I think in my best moments, I remember that, well, I think I made them uncomfortable by something I feel passionately about. And maybe that's a good thing. Doesn't mean there isn't that moment of a little bit of hatred, but try to move past it.
Right. Tell us about the darkest time in your life, how you got through that, and what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah. I think I had a really, coming out of college, I went to school up in New York. I went to Syracuse University,
Yeah.
and I came out of college and I went to live with my parents out west for a couple months, and then ended up getting like a gig in Brooklyn, New York, and came back east. And I felt like as a designer, that's where I had to be. And I remember being like, New York, that's it. I got to go back. And I took this job. I lived with my sister and her husband, and I went through a really rough period. It wasn't a good fit of a job. I didn't have any money. I was totally depending on my sister. I think at the time I can remember living in New Jersey and commuting into New York. And during that span of time, my grandmother passed away. Who I was very close with. I broke up with the person who I was dating at the time. Of course, in hindsight, a good thing. Our dog passed away. It was a time in my life where I think about it. And when you asked this question, I really had to go back. And I remember thinking at the time, towards the end of it, like, I guess I'm going to come out stronger of this, because what else could keep going wrong? I felt like I had come out of school and I was ready to take on the world, and then the world took me on. And I ended up taking, I think what's interesting is when you look back, I ended up taking a job in Baltimore in environmental graphics, which wasn't actually what I studied at Syracuse. And I just needed a job, and I needed some healthcare and to be on my own. And it ended up being so many wonderful things in Baltimore that I needed at the time. And so when I'm going through rough periods, I often think back that at the end of this, there will be a reason. So hang in there.
It reminds me of the Steve Jobs quote when he talks about you can't live your life kind of looking forward. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. That's what you just shared. Reminds me of.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see it really clearly now. At the time, I couldn't see through the tears.
we were in it too much.
Totally.
Who was the most influential person for you growing up?
Definitely my parents, both my mom and my dad, for different reasons. And I remain very close with them today. I think, they really instilled in me kind of that spirit of dabbling. They encouraged me I have two older sisters, so I'm the youngest of three girls. They encouraged me to do my own thing, to make my own pathway. But on the flip side of that, in the dabbling, they did encourage me, when I found something, to give it my all and to be in it. Like, I mean, from a young age, if I was going to sign up for a sports team, then I would go to practice and I would work hard and I would contribute. So I think it was kind of an interesting balance of like freedom and accountability at the same time.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
I'll read another quote you said and see why it resonates with you. You said that the best relationships are a balance of giving and receiving. Why does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I think a lot of us have a hard time receiving. And I think that in my work as a coach, I see, in contributing to burnout and a lot of exhaustion and fatigue, is that our giving comes from a really, really good place. Like, we want to serve others. We want to let others know that we love them. We want to share our talents and our gifts with the world. But we give and give and give. And then we kind of like, we can't pour from an empty cup, as the saying goes, right? And so we can't take anything back in, or we feel like maybe we don't deserve it. And I think it's important to be on the receiving end, because you've got to think about how it makes you feel when you give to someone, right? Like, if they shun that and turn that away, that's not a good feeling, like, or good energy on either part. So I think it is an important balance.
How can we improve on receiving more? Because as you say, it's very important. We cannot pour from an empty cup. What can we do to improve?
Yeah, I think it always starts with awareness of being, understanding why maybe you feel like you're not worthy of receiving things, and just beginning to understand where you maybe feel dissatisfied, and maybe how you can begin to bring the things into your life that support you. And whether that's receiving from other people or just receiving in different ways, like from nature, from the energy around us, from the time we can give ourselves. I always kind of like come from this place that if you're not at like a high level of like 100%, then you don't want to like give that like partial version of you to others. Right. So the receiving part is pretty imperative.
Most definitely. What do you find easy to do that your friends find hard to do?
I think wake up really early and exercise. I am a morning person.
Bless your heart.
I know. I'm a morning person. And that is not to say that if my alarm goes off at like 5:30 that I'm like, yay, this feels good. I don't have a hard time connecting with getting up and getting out of bed and knowing that quiet time or like going to the class I want to hit or hitting up the gym is going to make me feel that much better during the day. I think maybe it's, I was a long time swimmer. I would show up at the pool every morning. Maybe that's in me now.
Yeah.
But I like it. I like the mornings and I like to wake up early.
And 5:30 a.m., that's the time that you get up and start moving?
Yeah, well, not in non-COVID times. I will admit that with nowhere to get out of the house right now, it's not a 5:30 time.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's kind of my time during the weeks.
All right. Even in the cold weather when it's cold back east and snowy?
Yeah.
I'm impressed. I just can't believe it because you just want to snuggle up under the covers, but I get it.
Yeah, I mean, the snuggling's good too. And I will be in total transparency that there are mornings I hit the snooze too.
Yes,
but
sure.
In general, I like it. I think it feels good.
Hey, I like it too. What would you like to be better at?
Oh, probably dancing.
Oh,
I'm not a good dancer. And my husband comes from a family and a history of just like amazing dancers, people who move all the time. There's always music on in our house. And I'm happy to get out there and dance, but
is there a specific type of dance, whether it be the waltz or salsa or any type of dance you want to learn?
Oh my gosh.
Or everything?
We did everything. We took salsa lessons. It was like kind of I don't know. I don't know if I'd call it a win, but I love to move. And like I said, I love to be active. I'm so happy to move my body. I would just like to be better at it. Maybe more confident is the word to say.
All right. We could work on that. We got that. Now, when you turned 21, you were at Syracuse?
Yeah, I was.
Okay, so we're going to go back to Syracuse, upstate New York, and talk to 21-year-old Megan. Give her advice based on what you know now. What advice would you give your younger self?
To stay flexible and to keep my head up, even when things aren't turning out exactly like I think they should. And this is something I work on even still to this day, is kind of knowing that there's like a greater plan. And my mom has always said, make the plan. So God will laugh at you or whatever that line is.
Right.
And it's good. Like hard work is so good. It makes us feel, productive and we get to contribute. But, I would say, Megan, like be able to like take a step back and let things play out as they should without worrying.
Stay flexible. I like that.
Yeah.
What is the one lesson in life that took you the longest to learn?
It's probably along the same lines, that you don't have to control, that to do the work and then let it work for you and see what comes of it. So it's that idea of like giving 100% and then just kind of letting it be and letting it grow.
When you work with clients and they struggle with letting go of control, how do you help them kind of see that or maybe loosen up a bit?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is I think a lot of us know, right? And we can see it. And it looks different in so many situations. And in work, that can look like delegating. It can look like being aware of communication with the people you work with. It can be becoming aware of your own thoughts of like preparing for failure down the road. So it can be a lot of different mechanisms, but always the first step of kind of like noticing that and having the willingness to want to change it.
Okay. Now,
Yeah.
every great person has a sentence. What is your sentence? For example, my sentence is I love to help people unlock their creativity by teaching them how to DJ. What is your sentence?
Mm. Yeah, I want to help people live the most fulfilled life that they possibly can. I mean, depending on who you're speaking to or what you believe, this is our one shot, right? So I think what I love about what I'm doing and what I feel strongly about is that, we're not focusing on our mental and our physical health just to sit there and say like I have arrived, I am a healthy person. Like I feel passionate about bringing people to a place where they don't have to remember to be different, or they don't have to remember to take care of themselves, because at that point then we know that so much is opened up for them in life and they can focus on the things that actually matter. Like I don't want people worrying about their health so that they can be with their family, they can take on adventures, they can do the things that actually matter, right? So our work, technically goes into the background just so that they feel like really energized and alive and like focused and
Yeah.
intentional.
Okay. Now, what's one new habit that you've added to your daily routine in the past year or so that has been most beneficial?
Yes, I think it would have to be writing and journaling
Oh,
more.
okay. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I've always loved to write, but never really, I mean, except for emails in the corporate world, never, a lot of them, never really had the reason. But I find myself writing more, contributing to different blogs, keeping up with my own newsletter, but journaling at night for myself. As kind of, and this has been in the past, maybe more than a year now, but knowing that it makes me feel so good. So I ask myself a couple questions every night before I go to bed. And sometimes I'll write for like 5 seconds, and sometimes
Mhm.
I'll write for a while. Um, and so every night I ask myself one thing I'm grateful for, one thing I did right that day, one thing I want to do better, and then one thing I want to attract and bring into my life. Um, and I'm pretty consistent with it. And I would say I've been dabbling for a while, but I would say the consistency came over the past year.
Interesting. And that's a great writing practice. Why did you choose to do it at night instead of the morning? Because I'm a fan of morning pages. I try to do morning pages that I learned about in The Artist Way, which is right there.
Yeah.
Um, why nighttime instead of morning? I'm curious.
Mm, I think it helps me sleep, like on a
Oh,
regular, just plain level. I think it helps me clear my head. And I think that if I reflected the night before, I'm a big believer in that, like nighttime routines really help your morning routine. So if I can kind of reflect and kind of take that downtime the night before, I'll probably wake up fresher in the morning.
interesting. And
Yeah.
the follow-up question in terms of habits, why do you feel it's so difficult for people to take the first step in changing a habit?
Yeah. Well, I think from like a kind of uh gosh, how we're wired way. It's that anytime we go to change something, it's like as we sit here today, you feel you're safe, right? You've made it this far. And I think that every time you go to make a change in your life, like our brain and our body kind of puts on the brakes of like, oh, you're trying to do something different that I'm unfamiliar with, that feels unsafe. And I think that oftentimes, like I said earlier, we try to take on too much too fast. And it's really tough to stay in the long game. And I know often, like, I'll try something and, you don't see it working at first, and that can be discouraging. So I think that, I coach by like what I call 1% change. And so often people will come in with big goals, and we'll back it up so far as to like, what is the teeny tiniest thing you could be in action on in the next 24 hours? And that's kind of like a compounding, like almost like a bank account, like a compounding
Mhm,
effort. And that
mhm.
stuff, one, it feels easy, and two, it creates change over time.
Excellent explanation. What We're really big readers here on the Money Experience podcast. So if there was one, two, or three books you feel people should stop what they're doing right now and start to read them
Ooh.
immediately, what books come to mind?
Yeah. So I was really late to Ryan Holiday. I was really late to his
Mm,
books. The Obstacle is the Way is
yes.
something I read. That one comes to mind first and foremost. And then I followed up with Ego is the Enemy. But Obstacle is the Way had a huge impact on me in looking at challenges more as opportunities than things that should stop us dead in our tracks and keep us stuck. So That's the first thing that comes to mind.
Interesting. Great books. He's a great writer too.
Yeah.
What has been the best advice you have ever received?
Oh, the best advice I've ever received. Um, Probably to slow down. I think that, and I'm trying to think here. I think that I tend to want to move pretty fast. That's probably why I'm in coaching. It's probably why I work with the people that I do. But I noticed that a lot of my greatest discoveries and my greatest ideas come when I give myself this space to just kind of be and not really do. Um, and I think it happens in so many little micro ways, right? Even just like in that moment where I took a deep breath and I had to think for a second, I slowed down and I had to think for a moment.
Yeah, yeah.
And then when you start to play that on a greater effect, I think it just allows you to be like more intentional and not just like throw stuff into your day. Yeah. So I would say slow the roll, slow down.
Slow your roll. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
You briefly mentioned music before, so we're gonna say, you follow sports at all?
I do.
Who are some of your favorite teams?
Oh gosh. So I'm a big college sports fan. So
Okay.
I follow a lot of college basketball. My husband is a huge NBA fan.
Okay.
So when in season we follow the Bulls, Chicago Bulls a lot.
Bulls. But college, so you're a fan of Syracuse basketball. You go to the Carrier Dome. That would
Yeah.
make you happy. Okay, so we're gonna go to the Carrier Dome. We're gonna say that Megan's walking out to the court in the Carrier Dome. What song is playing for you as you walk out to the court?
So this is funny that you asked this, Amani, because my husband's been asking me this for like years. And it was just recently that Anderson .Paak Come Down came on.
Okay. All right.
And I looked at him and I was like, this might have to be my walkout song if I was ever gonna walk onto like a sports field. And
Yes.
and he was thrilled. But that might be it.
Good. Perfect. Awesome.
Yeah.
Tell the people how they can reach you, social media and all that.
Yeah. So you can reach me on my website. It's upswinghealthcoaching.com, and definitely reach out to me there, shoot me a message, or through email. On Instagram, I'm upswing_HC, and on Facebook, upswinghc as well.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to meet with us. I love what you're doing in the space. Want to continue to keep in touch with you. So thanks for being on the show. We let our guests leave us with any last minute words of wisdom or advice. So I'll say thank you again and allow you to take us home.
Oh, thank you. I think that, wherever anyone is and wherever they're listening, I just want to encourage you, as I said earlier, to slow down and kind of meet yourself where you are. And just kind of end with the idea that it's never too late. Like, it's never too late to do anything, to start anything. And I mean that in terms of starting a new healthy habit, or flipping your career and starting over. So, today's the day to take that 1%. Yeah.
Yes.
So go for it.
It's never too late. Excellent.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Amani.
You're welcome. Hold on.